It's nice
Yeah.
to see you all. So while we're waiting for Miss Lana to join, why don't you tell the folks, all of HRC's listeners and viewers, who you are, what you do, and where you do it?
Okay. Well, my name is Tiami Luckett. For those who don't know me, I do the work from Little Rock, Arkansas, but I do the work nationally, right? So my role is national organizer at Transgender Law Center, commonly known as TLC, and also I am the program manager of Positively Trans. So what I do is I provide education and awareness about HIV to anyone who is willing to listen, and also about like my existence as a trans person, right? Just debunking all of the myths that people have heard about trans people, because a lot of people who talk to me are like, I don't know any trans people. And I'm like, oh, but you know me, you know? And so they're like, oh my God, really? So yeah, like it just starts with a conversation. It really does. I've learned that I can get a lot more out of people by just being open and honest about who I am, allowing them to process whatever it is that they have to process. And then when they come to me again, like we're friends, you know, they're apologizing for stuff that they possibly thought. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you. You know, hey, George, and there's one of my friends right there. George, how are you?
And you brought up a great point already. I'm sure there are going to be quite a few more in the next 15 or 20 minutes. But one of the great points that you already brought up, and we're going to talk about National Transgender HIV Testing Day, but you brought up, people say that they don't know someone is trans. And the truth is, they knew you and didn't know you were trans. So they
Right.
do when they don't know.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, like our existence that people are actually introduced to is by way of media, television. Like they may see one aspect of trans existence, but that's not the totality of it, right? I didn't know anything about ballroom, but I'm a member of the trans community, right? So I get educated because like we're not a monolith. We're not all the same, right? And we're not all going to present the information the same way. So that's why I usually like take advantage of like being asked to be somewhere so that the message can still be spread.
Thank you. Thank you. And we appreciate that because folks need information and they need good information because Lord knows there's enough information out there. So thank you for being open and honest and in your authentic self, giving folks an opportunity to hear what the truth is and what the lies aren't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right.
For sure.
So yesterday was National Transgender HIV Testing Awareness Day, and we talked a lot at HRC about, oh, let me make sure to tell folks who I am, because I forgot I'm on HRC's live today. So my name is Tori Cooper, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for the Trans Justice Initiative at the Human Rights Campaign. My job is DC-based, but just like Tiomi, we work all across the country and really all across the world, making sure that we're bringing equality and equity to all marginalized folks, but more specifically in the work that I'm doing, making sure that we're really bringing light to voices like ours of trans and gender nonconforming people, of people who We'll use the term BIPOC in this case, which stands for Black, Indigenous people and Indigenous people of color, but really making sure that we're prioritizing Black and Brown people, because historically the work has not centered us and folks like us. Yeah.
Right.
So April 18th, National Transgender HIV Awareness Testing Day. So tell us a little bit about what that means to you and the work that you're doing in Arkansas and the work that's happening in TLC and really all across the country.
Right. So what that day means to me, it is a day to actually like, first of all, know your status. There's all this talk about ending the epidemic, right? But they're not actually like talking about what stops people from getting tested, right? It is these draconian laws. I'm in Arkansas, right? The HIV statute came into Arkansas in 1989. That same law is still in existence today. That law criminalizes my spit. It criminalizes whatever bodily fluid that comes from me with a maximum of like 30 years, right? So, first of all, that is one thing that is stopping people from getting tested. We need to remove these laws, right? So, we need to remove all of the barriers that are stopping us from getting to know new transmissions, right? And so, for me, I wanted to know during a time when I was sober. We have to meet people where they are. So when I became sober, I really cared about life. So doing things different today than I did 12, 13 years ago, right? I was the one that would jump in and out of cars. I was the one that was engaging in sex work. I was actually the one that did not care about myself. And I am not saying that people who engage in sex work don't care about themselves. Some people find it very pleasurable. I wasn't one of those people, right? But because of the laws, I have to be very careful about who I invite into my space, right? Because the law here states that I have to tell my sexual partner that I'm living with HIV before we engage in sex, right? And if I don't, then that's that felony that I can be presented with up to 30 years. Okay. So I have to worry about like being a trans woman. First of all, my safety, right? Because Black trans women have been like murdered all the years that I've been in advocacy, right? And we have bared the brunt of these murders the entire time that I have been advocating. So since 2014, when I came on the scene, one of the things that first hit me was trans murders, right? And so we're murdered simply because of the person that we choose to lay with, the person who actually loves us. But society tells them that they can't. Society tells them that they're gay. Society puts all of these labels on people. Get out of people's bedrooms, get out of people's pants, right? I don't wonder what's going on with Tori. I don't need to know that. I don't wonder what's going on with anybody that is on this live because it is none of my business at all. Who you choose to lay with, what you choose to do with your body, that is none of my business, right? But when it comes to HIV, trans people are not actually receiving the services that they need, right? And so we can't get we can't get to know new transmissions if we don't have trans people centered in the conversation, right? Particularly Black trans people. If we're not diverting resources into our neighborhoods, then we're going to be stuck in that same rut that we've always been in, where people are not hiring us, and we don't have a safe place to live, right? So what are the options out there for us? We can either engage in sex work to have a roof over our head, or we can engage in drugs so that we don't have to think about anything at all, right? Or we can engage in a relationship and simply be the doormat for someone because it gives us a stable place to live. That's not my story right now. I choose to be alone because I choose to put me first. And it is not selfish. It is self-preservation. Like, I'm not one of those people that, oh, he thinks I'm so cute. Let me go ahead and no, sorry. I'm not that one. I did that 13, 14 years ago, and I ended up with HIV, right? So I don't care about people telling me how pretty I am, right? Because if they can't do things by the way that I want to do them, then we're always going to be at a stalemate. That means that I'm going to tell you about my HIV. I'm going to make sure that we use condoms, right? And I do know that undetectable equals untransmittable. But most of all, the most important thing and actually like the most degrading thing that I have to do is actually like leave a paper trail about my status to whoever is planning on being with me, right? I have to leave that paper trail because like I said in the beginning, the laws are still here and I don't want to be incriminated. I don't want to be incriminated. I don't want to lose my freedom behind sex.
Girl, you just dropped a whole bunch of amazing stuff here. Girl, I love talking to you. And I am so inspired by the fact that there are folks who paying attention to every word that's coming out of your mouth because they needed to hear this. I'm reading some of the chats, and there are people who weren't aware that HIV criminalization law still exists. They do not match science. Science says that if a person who has an undetectable viral load and has maintained it for 6 consecutive months, that they can't. That's the key word.
They
CDC
can't.
said that they can't pass HIV to their sex partners. That's number one. So the laws are not reflective of what science says. And we
Right.
know in this country, particularly after the last administration, many of them don't care about science. But even with that being said, you also spoke some real truth to power, that there are people who simply don't want to know their status because they're afraid of being criminalized.
Yeah. And if you don't know, if you've never been tested and no one has ever given you a positive diagnosis, then one thing they can't do is incriminate you for it,
They
right?
can't.
They can't. So I've talked to people I grew up with, went to school with, even college, and they've told me, I am so proud of the work that you're doing. You really put Helena on the map, but I couldn't do it. I wouldn't want to know. And it's simply because being from their hometown, they're following me, so they're actually listening to the stuff that I've been saying. They're listening to the articles that have been out about me, and they know about undetectable equals untransmittable. They know about it, but they still don't see the journey for themselves. And that's one of the things that really saddens me when I go home, is that I don't see the services there in my hometown. Like, I'm in the capital city of Arkansas, so I have access to pretty much everything that I need here. But that's not the case in my small town. So
We've got maybe about 5 minutes left between the two of us. But I've
okay.
heard you mention a couple of times services or lack of services. Can you tell folks just a little bit about what type of services are needed for people who have HIV or people who don't, that could possibly keep them from getting HIV? More specifically, trans women or
Yes,
trans
yes. So
people or non-binary people. Let me be inclusive of all trans identities.
right. Trans and non-binary people, cisgender people, it does not matter because this is a human condition, right? So let's start there. It's a human condition. So for me, and this is where my advocacy actually started, I didn't want people to go through what I went through. I was alone in learning that my body was producing antibodies. So after that, that was 2 years of denial, basically, right? And then I started calling around after talking to a friend in Memphis. And this was after it was confirmed that I was living with HIV, right? So at that point, I didn't know what to do. I really didn't. And I talked to a friend, and she told me that since I was in the capital city of Arkansas, that they had to have services, because in Memphis, they had services for people living with HIV. So that's when I pulled out my smartphone and I went to researching every keyword or key phrase I could think of: HIV in Arkansas, AIDS in Arkansas, HIV services, medicine, like everything. And I came upon an organization that actually handled the Hopper grant, and they referred me to the organization that actually held the Ryan White grant. So with Ryan White, my medicine, which is now today $7,000 a month, is taken care of. I don't pay anything. I don't pay anything because that's what scared me the most. I wouldn't be able to get this life-saving medication. So Ryan White Services provided all of the services that I need, whether it was mental, with me dealing with the HIV status, right? Something new being introduced to my body, my existence. So I have mental health services that are taken care of, ambulatory services that are taken care of. Anytime I need to make an appointment, Ryan White takes care of that. Ryan White takes care of the copay. Ryan White takes care of the medicine that I have, right? And Ryan White now, for trans people, is actually adding trans related services to the healthcare that Ryan White Services actually provide. So that's something that I felt like was very needed because one thing that I do know, a lot of trans people that I've come into contact with were not able to physically transition until after an HIV diagnosis, right?
Mm.
And so that's that. I think that that's backwards. I really do. I think that that's backwards. I think that trans people should have the services that they need up front so that they don't have to resort to an HIV diagnosis, so that they can be housed, so that they can have food, so that they can make sure that all of their healthcare needs are taken care of. Because in certain areas, that is the reality for trans people.
That's good stuff, T. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you for your transparency. And guess what? We're about to close, but Miss Lana was able to join us. It's good to see you, beautiful.
Yeah.
Don't
Good
go
to
yet.
see.
Don't
Go
go
ahead.
yet. So, Miss Lana,
Okay.
yesterday was Miss Lana, excuse me. Yesterday was National Transgender HIV Awareness Day. So, what we want to hear from you, tell the folks who you are, what you do, and where you do it first.
Oh, God, that's a lot. I do several things. First off, thanks for having me. Sorry I couldn't join on sooner. I'm feeling a little under the weather, but I had to join you ladies. It's such a powerful conversation. I'm Lana Brooks. Most of the community knows me around from when I started at Someone Cares, as I've been doing the work now for about 6, going on 7 years. That's when I started volunteering for HIV prevention and HIV awareness. But from there, I moved on to the Emory Hope Clinic, and now I'm a research interviewer under medicines and vaccinations at the Emory Hope Clinic. It's just a really fancy way of saying, hey, come out, join this study, right? Because research is important. There's actually a transgender study at the Emory Hope Clinic now, which studies to see if the transmission of HIV has any effects on the rectal mucosa based on the taking of hormone products. So are hormone products harming us to contract HIV more so than not? Like, so that's what that's about. And it's important to get people in on that. But that's just me in a nutshell. I do a couple of other things, but yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you, because I have a couple of good questions for you, and I'm going to address something that I saw. Rain hyphen Brooks. I saw that you typed this is scary. It can be scary. But the
Yeah.
thing that we want people to glean from this conversation is that if you're a person who's living with HIV, it doesn't have to be scary. There are folks who are going to support you. There's healthcare there for you. And if you're a person who's not living with HIV, you don't have to get HIV. That's why yesterday was so important. That's why having these conversations is so important. So we have an opportunity as trans people, as however it is that you navigate the world, we have an opportunity to make sure that people get all of the information so that they can make the best decisions for themselves.
Absolutely.
I don't believe that we can change people's minds. I don't think we as humans have the ability to change people's minds for them. But we have a responsibility to provide as much information as we can so that folks can make the best and most informed decisions for themselves. All right. So in our last 2 minutes, Lana, would you please tell us what's one thing in an ideal world? Give us 1 or 2 things that trans folks need to not get HIV, and what are 2
Just one
things
or
that
two?
trans folks need if they have an HIV diagnosis? That's
So that's
big
2
stuff,
questions.
right?
Okay, so what's at least 1 or 2 things, which is impossible, that you'll need in order to not gain an HIV diagnosis? That's the first question. Second question, what are 1 or 2 things needed if you do get the diagnosis that you are HIV positive? I'll speak on that one first because I remember the day that I received that diagnosis. And I'm living proof that the only 2 things, and this is tough because you're going to need more, and it takes the effort for you to go and actually reach out there and get it. Don't expect for someone to come and, grab you. You want to fight for yourself, right? But 1 or 2 things that were sure needed is a strong support system. If you're receiving an HIV diagnosis, go and get your strong people. Go and get your strong friends. Find someone you can tell confidentially, this is going on with you, so that someone is aware of your mental health, because there's a lot that goes into that, right? You have so many questions. Maybe there's someone in your circle who has it. Maybe there's someone in your circle who doesn't have it, but also feared getting it. Reach out to your strong people in your circle. don't go through that alone. Get a strong support system. Secondly, make sure that you ask every question to your doctor that you possibly can think of. Leave nothing unscathed. Leave nothing untouched. If you want to know if HIV is going to, do something with your skin or alter how you feel when you get up in the morning, or if it means that you're not going to be able to have children, or if it means that you're not going to be able to live a regular life, ask your doctor. Become one with that doctor, baby. My doctor said, hey, Ilana, how are you today? And I'm okay with that because you get paid to do this one too. I gotta know. If I'm sick one day, I call them. Hey, you got time for a Zoom? Build that relationship with your good people, your strong people in your support system, and build that connection with your doctor. Now, with the Emory Health Clinic, I started a resource guide for transgender women living in Atlanta or coming to Atlanta to live here. And it was a guide. Several things, and this is all wrapped up into one. To not receive an HIV diagnosis is to know your organizations, get the information. How is it possible for you to contract it? Because if you don't know how to contract it, how are you going to stay away from those things, right? If you know it's sexually transmitted and you have to have unprotected sex, know that even if you do have unprotected sex, yes, you're at risk for catching HIV, but you're also at risk for catching other STDs and STIs as well. So it's more than just HIV in that umbrella, right? So we want to make sure that we know how to contract it. I started this work several times ago, and I heard, people saying, oh, you can't touch me because no, that's not how you contract it, sugar. I could touch you all day long and give you a great hug. Hugs are still in my life. Okay, it's a sexually transmitted disease, and it's through bodily fluids that you contract it, but you'll never know if you don't go and get that information. So get the information, stay connected, stay active within your community would be the number two thing for you not to contract HIV. Stay connected. Be aware of what's going on. Be aware of the numbers. Be aware of the numbers in your area. Or do you have a high percentage in DeKalb County for HIV? Or do you have a higher percentage in Fulton County for HIV? Yes, I know that sounds crazy, but it's possible for you to know that. We do everything else with Google, baby. Google it.
Google it. So thank you, ladies. That was amazing. Oh my God. We could have this conversation for at least another hour, but child, I'm sleepy. But with that being said, I would like to thank both of you for joining, and each and every person who tuned in for a minute or an hour today. This was really good conversation, and we're going to have much more of these Trans Talks conversation for you all with amazing folks from all across different walks of life. We're going to talk about their experience and their experiences. So we want to thank you all for joining the HRC today for our live, and also let everyone listening know at the Human Rights Campaign, our HIV Health Equity Program, who is currently headed by Associate Director Vanessa Castro, and myself, I'm the Director of Community Engagement for the Trans Justice Initiative. We have a partnership where we actually can provide you with free at-home HIV testing kits. Simply send an email to me at tori.cooper@hrc.org. That's Tori, Tori, .cooper@hrc.org, or Vanessa Castro, VANESSA .Castro, CASTRO @hrc.org, and we'll be happy to send. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. We'll be happy to send you your free at-home HIV testing kits, and hopefully be able to link you to the type of PrEP, which is if you get a negative diagnosis, or for HIV care if you get a reactive diagnosis. We love you, and we thank you for tuning in. Talk to you ladies soon. Thank you, everybody.